Tie my shoes. Where's my bag? I don't want this shirt. Get another one. Mary obeyed as patiently as she could, but a dull ache settled in her chest. They don't see me as a person, she thought. Just someone to do things for them. Still, she reminded herself why she was here. She hadn't come to make friends or be appreciated. She had come to work, to earn. Whatever she had to swallow, she would. By midday, her stomach twisted with hunger. In the kitchen, after the family had left the table, she grabbed a leftover piece of bread and a few spoonfuls of beans, eating quickly by the sink. She barely had time to chew before Mrs. Nora's sharp eyes found her. Quick, finish. More work to do. Mary nodded, swallowing dryly. She longed for a sip of water but didn't dare stop to get one. Later, she told herself. I'll drink later. But later never seemed to come. Day after day, the routine repeated. She woke before dawn and worked long into the night, scrubbing, washing, cooking, chasing after the children. Her hands grew raw from chemicals, her back ached from bending over floors for hours. Exhaustion clung to her like a second skin. Yet she pushed on. Because she had to. Because somewhere far away, her family was waiting for the money she sent home. And that was what mattered most. If she ever paused to stretch or rest, even for a moment, one of the employers would appear, their sharp gaze cutting through her like a blade. Lazy, they would mutter, as if she weren't standing right there, as if she weren't exhausted from endless hours of work. It didn't take long for Mary to understand, she was not a guest, not even a valued employee. She was treated as something owned, something owed. The family often spoke about her in front of her, their voices unconcerned, their words drifting through the air in Arabic. At first, the language was foreign, an unbroken wall of sound. But bit by bit, she started to understand. And with understanding came pain. Sometimes, their words held mockery. Other times, outright insults. And then, one day, she heard a word that made her blood run cold, ABD. Later, she would learn what it meant. Slave. Each time she tried to assert herself, even just a little, to slow down, to take a breath, to ask for the most basic dignity, she was reminded of her place. About a week in, Mary finally gathered the courage to ask about her salary. She had been counting the days, dreaming of the moment she could send even a small amount home to her mother and children. That night, after finishing her tasks, she approached Mrs. Nora with a quiet but hopeful voice. Madam, will I be paid at the end of the month? I would like to send money home to my family. At first, there was silence. Then, a slow, chilling transformation in Mrs. Nora's face. Huh! The laugh was sharp, humorless. After all we spent to bring you here, you dare ask about money now. Mary's stomach clenched. I am sorry, madam, she whispered, her pulse quickening. I only wanted to know. Mrs. Nora's voice cut through her like a whip. Do you have any idea how expensive you were? The agency fee, the plane ticket, the paperwork. We will decide when you deserve a salary. Do not ever ask again. The words landed like a slap. Mary lowered her head, the sting of humiliation burning her throat. Yes, madam, she murmured. That night, in her tiny room, she curled up with the only piece of home she had, a worn photograph of her children. Silent tears traced down her cheeks as she clutched it to her chest. I must endure this, she told herself, forcing the thought to take root. Maybe after another month, they will pay me. I have to be patient. But deep down, a quiet dread had already started to grow. As the weeks passed, Mary's world shrank. What little freedom she had was slipping through her fingers, and she could feel the walls closing in. At first, she had been allowed a few minutes each night to call home. She would whisper reassurances to her mother and children, hiding the exhaustion in her voice. I'm okay, she'd say, even though her body ached and loneliness pressed heavy on her chest. Then, even that small mercy was taken from her. One evening, as she stood in the dimly lit kitchen, cradling her phone close, she spoke softly in Swahili, desperate to make every second count. But before she could finish, a shadow loomed over her. Mr. Asalam snatched the phone from her hands. No phone, he said sharply, his dark eyes cold and unyielding. Mary's breath caught. Sir, please. I was only speaking to my children, just for a moment. Her voice trembled, raw with desperation. But he merely shook his head and slipped the phone into his pocket. No more calls. You are here to work, not chat. If I catch you again, there will be punishment. Mary's heart pounded as he walked away. That night, she curled up on the thin mattress in her small, windowless room, silent tears soaking her pillow. She had lost her only tether to the world outside, to the people who loved her. Without her phone, she was completely isolated. Her employers already held her passport, controlled her pay, now, they had taken her voice. She felt like a bird in a gilded cage. The house was grand and beautiful, but to her, it was nothing more than a prison. And now, fear was her constant companion. Then came Friday morning, the day everything changed. The household was unusually quiet. Friday was a sacred day for the Asalam family, a day of prayer and reflection. Mary's role was always the same: serve coffee or tea after prayers, then retreat quietly to the background. She never expected anything different. But as she dusted a shelf in the hallway, Mr. Asalam appeared before her, his face unreadable. Come, he said. Mary hesitated, unsure. Still, she followed, her pulse quickening as she stepped toward the living room, toward whatever awaited her next. In the living room, the family, Mr. Salam, Mrs. Nora, their 2 children, and Mr. Salam's elderly mother, gathered on the carpet, preparing for evening prayers. The air was calm, the soft murmur of Arabic verses already beginning to weave through the space. Mary hesitated near the doorway, unsure of where she belonged in this moment. She had always been careful not to intrude on the family's rituals. But to her surprise, Mr. Salam looked up and gestured for her to come forward. You join. Kneel here, he said, his English deliberate but firm. Mary's breath caught. Join the prayers. Her pulse quickened. She had never done that before, she wasn't Muslim, and participating felt unfamiliar, even wrong. She was in the middle of chores, and besides, she wasn't sure if this was truly an invitation or an expectation. Sir, I am Christian, she said gently, offering a small, uncertain smile. I can wait in the kitchen until you're finished. I don't want to interrupt. Before she could finish, Mrs. Nora's voice cut through the room, sharp and impatient. Just do as you are told. The weight of the family's gaze settled on her. Mary felt her stomach tighten. This wasn't a request, it was something else, perhaps a test, a reminder of her place in the household. Slowly, she lowered herself onto the carpet, her mind racing. The elderly grandmother began the prayer, her voice steady and melodic. The others bowed their heads in deep devotion. Mary copied their movements, kneeling, bowing, but she could not bring herself to recite words she did not know, words that were not her own. As she sat in silence, the youngest boy picked up at her, his eyes curious. He tugged on his father's sleeve and whispered something. Mr. Salam's gaze flicked toward Mary. His eyes darkened as realization set in, she was only mimicking, not truly praying. He rose abruptly, taking a slow step toward her. Speak the words, he said, his voice low but pressing. Mary swallowed hard. I don't know them, sir, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The room fell unevenly quiet. The unfinished prayer hung between them, suspended in tension. Mrs. Nora exhaled sharply, her expression unreadable. Mr. Solom's hands curled at his sides. Mary lowered her eyes, feeling exposed. She had wanted to be respectful, but now, caught between duty and conscience, she wasn't sure which choice would keep her safe. You refuse our prayer. You disrespect us in our own home. Mary's breath hitched. No, sir. I can't. I don't understand them. Please. Her voice trembled, and her hands clenched in front of her as if she could hold herself together. Mr. Solom's face darkened, but there was something beneath his fury, something colder. His fingers clamped around her arms, his grip so tight it sent a jolt of pain up to her shoulders. You will not insult us under this roof, he growled. If you will not pray, you will learn respect another way. The moment splintered into something unreal. Mary gasped as he yanked her to her feet, his grip unrelenting. Her legs struggled to keep up as he dragged her toward the front of the house. She barely had time to understand where he was taking her before she saw it, the staircase. The balcony. Her stomach turned. Sir, please. Her voice broke as she fought against his grasp. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend. Please, sir. Her words were swallowed by the heavy air. Mr. Solom didn't slow. He hauled her up the stairs as though she weighed nothing. Her feet barely grazed the steps, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts. At the top, the double doors burst open, spilling blinding morning sunlight onto the balcony. The air smelled of warm stone and jasmine, an almost cruel contrast to the terror knotting in Mary's stomach. Then she saw the courtyard below. She froze. No. Please. Her scream tore from her throat. Panic surged through her, giving her strength. She dug her heels into the floor, reached out, and clung to the iron railing with all her might. Her fingers ached as she gripped the cool metal, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Mr. Solom was stronger. His hands closed over hers, peeling her fingers away one by one. Madam, please. Mary turned her tear-streaked face to the woman standing in the doorway. Don't let him. I'll do anything. Mrs. Nora stood with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. You will never disobey again, Mr. Solom whispered in her ear. Then he shoved. The world shifted. The railing vanished beneath her. For an instant, she was weightless. Sky. Sunday. The balcony tilting away. Then. She was falling. A piercing scream tore from Mary's throat, a raw, desperate sound that shattered the night air. Time seemed to stretch, slowing each agonizing second as she fell from the second-floor balcony. Her arms flailed, grasping wildly for something, anything, to stop her descent. But there was nothing. Only empty space. The courtyard tiles rushed up to meet her. I'm going to die. A final thought flashed through her mind, not of herself, but of her children. A sorrow so deep it eclipsed even fear. Then, impact. For a moment, there was only silence. A suffocating stillness. Pain came next. A searing, unbearable agony that stole her breath. If she were dead, she wouldn't feel this. No, she was still here. Still trapped in this body that now screamed in protest. The world blurred. Distantly, Mary heard shouting. Doors slamming. Footsteps pounding against the pavement. Someone was banging on the gate. A voice, deep and urgent, cut through the haze. An older man, his Arabic words unfamiliar but his tone unmistakably gentle. He climbed over the wall and rushed to her side, his breath heavy with exertion. Ya Allah, he whispered, his face tight with shock as he took in her broken form. Mary wanted to speak, to tell him what had happened. But she couldn't. The pain was too much. All she could do was cling to the sound of his voice, grounding herself in that single thread of kindness. Then she heard her employer's voice, Mrs. Nora. She jumped, the woman lied, her words smooth and practiced. She tried to run away and jumped. Mary's stomach twisted. Rage flared within her, but her body betrayed her. She couldn't move. She couldn't scream the truth. Darkness pressed at the edges of her vision, and no matter how hard she fought it, she was slipping away. Days later, Mary awoke to the sterile scent of antiseptic and the rhythmic beeping of medical machines. Pain was a dull, ever-present throb beneath the layers of medication. When she tried to move, agony fled through her body, sharp and unforgiving. The doctors explained her injuries: fractures in both arms, a shattered leg, and worst of all, a broken spine. The words hit harder than the fall itself. They didn't know if she would ever walk again. Tears welled in her eyes, not from the pain, but from the weight of it all. She had survived. But at what cost? While Mary was recovering in the hospital, one of the men who had helped bring her there urged her to share her story. "Your story must be told," he said gently. For the first time in a long while, Mary felt truly seen. Her family, who had been anxiously by her side, felt a wave of emotions: relief, gratitude, and the comfort of knowing that someone finally understood what she had endured. After 2 weeks in the hospital, arrangements were made for Mary to return to Kenya for further treatment and to recover in the familiar embrace of home. She still couldn't walk and would need a wheelchair, but her heart longed for her homeland, where she could begin to heal, both physically and emotionally. On the day of her departure, a kind-hearted volunteer and several members of the Kenyan community came to see her off. Because she couldn't yet sit upright, they carefully transferred her onto a stretcher for the flight. As the plane lifted off from Riyadh, Mary felt something shift inside her. It was more than just leaving a place behind, it was shedding a nightmare. With each mile, she felt lighter, as if the weight of her suffering was being left behind in the clouds. When Mary arrived in Nairobi, the atmosphere at the airport was thick with both joy and sorrow. Journalists and TV cameras were waiting, her story had become national news. But amid the crowd, the most important faces were those of her family. Her mother rushed toward her as soon as she was wheeled out, her emotions spilling over in both grief and relief. Nearby, Mary's children stood wide-eyed, their small faces filled with both excitement and confusion. They had waited so long to see their mother again, but seeing her in bandages, lying on a stretcher, was overwhelming. Mary stretched out her arms as best she could, and her children hesitated for only a moment before leaning in to embrace her carefully. "I'm here. I'm home," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks as she kissed their foreheads. It was a bittersweet reunion, joy laced with the painful reality of what had happened. As Mary slowly adjusted to life in a wheelchair, she realized her story was bigger than just her. The more she listened, the more she learned, hers was not an isolated case. News reports and radio shows shared similar stories of other women, some who had suffered even worse fates while working abroad. Many had not survived to tell their stories. From Kenya to Uganda, Nigeria to the Philippines, the same heartbreaking patterns emerged. The words, modern slavery, were being used, and Mary knew they were true. But she refused to let her pain be just another tragic story. Instead, it became her mission. She had survived for a reason, and she was determined to be a voice for those who could no longer speak. Her journey had started with hope, descended into darkness, and now rose again, this time, as a fight for justice. Mary's story is one that moves the soul, a testimony of cruelty and resilience, of despair and hope. It is a call to action, a reminder that no one should suffer in silence. Never again should we allow this hidden horror to continue. The world must listen, and together, we must set the captives free. Thank you so much for watching, and please don't forget to share this story with your family and your friends, whom I love to see them till I see you again in my next story. Goodbye.